Gurubhyo Namaha. On this Sunday, a couple of days after Deepavali, we continue with the third session in the Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashya examination. In the previous couple of lectures, we did a quick introduction and we talked about the three introductory verses that Shankaracharya provides before starting off the Taittiriya Upanishad commentary, and the Shanti mantra, Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha, that is counted as the first passage in the Shiksha Valli. The Shiksha Valli is the first chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad. The Taittiriya Upanishad itself is divided into three Vallis: Shiksha Valli, Brahmananda Valli, and the Ananda Valli. So the Shiksha Valli is actually a preliminary chapter that prepares the ground for the Brahmananda Valli and the Ananda Valli. There are multiple Upanishadic Vidyas that are discussed in the Shiksha Valli first, starting from a very basic level of how to recite the Veda onto more advanced meditative processes that are taught as preparatory for Upanishadic analysis, for Brahma Vidya, for Jignasa. So in the previous second session, we saw how Shankaracharya explains the Shanti mantra, that is the first Anuvaka of the Taittiriya Upanishad, Shanno Mitrasham Varunaha. Mitra, Varuna, Aryama, Indra, Brihaspati, Vishnu, all of these devatas from the Vaidika tradition are associated with a cosmic function and an individual function related to certain parts of the human body, right? So Mitra was described as the deity in charge of the day and the pranavritti, the breath. Varuna is the deity of the night and a different aspect of the breath, that is the apanavritti. Aryama was that aspect of the sun that is in Aditya, the sun, and enlivens our vision, Chakshushi. So this way, all the devatas of the Vaidika pantheon are correlated with a cosmic function and an individual function, a macrocosm and a microcosm. We see this happening all the time in the Upanishadic texts. So once that Shanti mantra is done, we move on to the second passage in the Shiksha Valli, the one that gives the Shiksha Valli its name. In the previous session, we touched upon the fact that Shankaracharya pays attention to this minutest detail. He does not say that his concern is only with the philosophy of Advaita Vedanta. He touches upon grammar, he touches upon the level of karma needed before we can give up the karma to talk about Vedanta. So in the Shanti mantra, for instance, we talked about where he says Tvameva pratyaksham brahmasi, Tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami is what we recite, but how Shankara takes it with respect to the other recitation tradition that's still extant. Tvameva pratyaksham brahma vadishyami. So he says, he takes it as Tvameva. So these little grammar points were noted. We will see a little more of it in the Shiksha Dhyaya as well. So the second passage of the Shiksha Valli says, Shiksham vya syamaha varnasvaraha matra balam samasantanaha ityukta shiksha dhyaya. That is it for the Shiksha Dhyaya. This is the second passage of the Taittiriya Upanishad, Shiksha Valli. Shiksham vyakhyāsyāmaha varnasvaraha matra balam sama santanaha. 6 constituent patterns. Ityukta Shikshadhyaya iti uktaha Shikshadhyaya. This is what is said to be the chapter on Shiksha. That ends the whole passage. Very short, very concise, very crisp. So let's see how Shankaracharya explains all these terms. These are really small pointers to how the Veda is supposed to be recited. But if you notice, the very first word does not say Shiksha as we are used to in normal speech. Shiksha for lesson. The Upanishad says Shiksha. So Shankaracharya makes it a point to talk about this as well. Shiksham vyakhyāsyāmaha. Shikshaiva shiksha. Dairghyan chandasam. What we say as Shiksha in normal speech is what the Upanishad calls Shiksha. The elongation of this vowel, the dirgha nature, Dairghyam, in the E, in the Shiksha, is Chandasam. Chandasam means this is something that pertains to Chandas, that is the language of the Veda, which does not correlate or which does not conform to the rules of grammar that are laid down for normal human speech. Panini himself, in the construction of the Paninian grammar system, mentions Chandasam as forms that are found in the Veda that do not conform to his rules. But this is because the language came first, the Veda recitation came first, Panini's grammar rules came later. So you cannot expect the archaic language to conform to the rules laid down by grammarians who lived much later than the appearance of the language itself and laid down rules for future generations to follow as norms. The grammar norms are not followed in many instances in the Veda. There are many such instances that happen in very popular mantras that people would have heard multiple times. For example, Bhadram karnebhih shrunuyama devaha. Karnebhih in this particular mantra does not conform to Paninian rules. For a noun that ends in the a sound, akaranta shabda, you expect the form to be karnaihi. Those of you who know a little bit of Sanskrit grammar will remember the Rama Shabda, Ramena Ramabhyam Ramaihi in the Pullingam, Netra in the Strilingam, Netrena Netrabhyam Netraihi. So the masculine and neuter nouns ending in a would take the form with aihi at the end, Ramaihi, Netraihi. The expectation is Karnaihi, but the Veda mantra says Karnebhihi. This variation from grammar expectations is what is called Chandasam. In the same way, in the Taittiriya Upanishad here, Shiksha, the elongated E, is Chandasa. So Shankaracharya makes it a point to mention it here, as this elongation, Dairghyam, is a feature of the Vedic recitation, not a part of normal Samskrita usage. The next word is Vyakhyāsyāmaha. We will explain. The word Vyakhyanam is something that might be familiar to many listeners. But Shankaracharya does not leave even that form uncommented. He does not simply say, okay, this means we will explain. He does say Vispashtena Prakatayishyamaha, that we will explain in detail. But he also provides a sentence that explains how the form Vyakhyāsyāmaha comes into being. So this has the prefix Vya and then the verbal root Kya, and then Syamaha takes it to the future tense. Vyakhyāsyāmaha. But the Kya itself comes from a substitution for the verbal root chaksh. And Shankaracharya makes it a point to mention that in the commentary as well. Chakshinaha khyang adishtasya vyang purvasya vyaktava karmana rupam. So he puts down a sentence that says, from the root chaksh, chakshinaha, because of the rule that substitutes khyang adishtasya, prefixed with vyang purvasya. So the word vyakhyāsyamaha is broken down into its substituent parts and explained in the commentary as well. So the reason I'm pointing this out is that the Shankara Bhashya has points that addresses grammarians, that addresses language purists, that addresses the general seeker, and multiple different kinds of audiences as well. This also goes back to what we mentioned in the previous session. Shankara had saluted the previous teachers of the tradition as those who explained the Upanishad padavakya pramanataha. The same way, Shankaracharya also explains the Upanishad word by word and sentence by sentence, padavakya. So let's see how he explains the next few words. Varnaswaraha matrabalam samasantanaha. Varnaha is described as akaradihi, the vowels. The vowels are the constituent sounds that impart life to language. Consonants by themselves don't have sound, they are unvoiced. And they need a vowel, they need the conjunction with the vowel in order to get expressed. So the primary units are the vowels, varnaha, akaradihi. So we start with a. Once the vowels are done, then we move on to the consonants. So even in the way the Sanskrit language is structured, we first learn a, I, u. So that's where we start off. And only then we move on to the consonants, the kavarga, chavarga, etc. So varnaha is the akaradihi. So that describes the components of the sound. The next word is swaraha. Swara is described as udattadihi. In the Vedic recitation, we have udatta, which is the tone at which we start, anudatta, the relatively lower pitched tone as compared to udatta. There are texts called Shiksha and Pratishakyas that describe how these are to be rendered. For example, in the Taittiriya Pratishakhya, we have these descriptions. Uchchairudattaha, Nichairanudataha, Samaharaswaritaha, etc. So swara is udattadihi. Matra. Hraswadhyaha is what Shankaracharya says. Matra refers to the unit of time that is associated with the vowels. We distinguish between short vowels and long vowels. The elongation in the vowels is an important feature of the Sanskrit language. Normally we are used to hrasva and dirgha. In the Veda recitation, there is also an enumeration of a third length, and that is called pluta. Hrasva, dirgha, pluta are noticed and described in the codes that say how the Veda is supposed to be recited. So what are hrasva and dirgha? A, I. These are the short vowels and the long vowels. The Taittiriya Upanishad itself in the Brahmananda Valli has an instance where pluta happens. Kaschet samashnuta u. The expectation is for that a sound to be elongated for 3 counts. Kaschet samashnuta u. That is the only correct way to recite it as per tradition. It is not dirgha, it is even longer than dirgha, so it is pluta. All of this put together are just called matras, the amount of time that is devoted for each sound. So we have varna, the constituents of sound, swara, the pitch at which the sound is to be recited, matra, the time value associated with each of these sounds. So this establishes the sound, the pitch of the sound, and the rhythm, the cadence of the sound. After that, the word is balam. The explanation given for the word balam, strength, is prayatna vishesha. The effort required to be put into the recitation. So recitation requires the sound itself, the pitch at which the sound is to be recited, the rhythm in which the recitation is to be done, and balam, or the strength, or the prayatna, the effort, will affect the intensity with which the recitation is to be done. Then comes sama, santana. Sama refers to the consistency. So the way Shankaracharya explains is madhyama vritti. So once you start the recitation, you need to have consistency in the intensities we put in, with the pitch values that we give to the sounds, and to the rhythm in which we recite. That is what gives beauty and consistency to the recitation. We cannot arbitrarily change the amount of time we spend on each sound in the middle of a recitation. We cannot arbitrarily change the pitch in which we recite in the middle of the recitation. So that adds consistency to the whole recitation section as well. So that is what is sama, the madhyama vritti, the baseline, as we say it in more modern scientific jargon. Santana is santati samhitetyarthaha. Once all these are established, we have the flow of the recitation. So that is the santana or the santati. Another Sanskrita word that is often used in this context is pravaha, flow. So all of these put together form the chapter on Shiksha, ityukta Shiksha dhyaya. So the chapter in which all of these are taught, the components of the recitation, that is the Shiksha dhyaya. So that is the short and sweet second anuvaka of the Taittiriya Upanishad, Shiksha Valli. This really small section is what gives the entire chapter of the Taittiriya Upanishad its name. Shiksha Valli is because it starts off after the Shanti mantra with a brief description of Shiksha. So what the Upanishad does is, instead of becoming a manual on what are the vowels, what are the pitch at which it should be recited, what should be the rhythm, what should be the consistency and the flow of recitation, instead of talking all of these in detail, it just gives us a sort of a lexical, an index-like keywords: varna, swara, matra, balam, sama, santana. If you take care of all of these, you have your recitation established. Because of course, we have to remember that all the Veda, from the Samhita portions all the way to the Aranyakas, are orally transmitted, learnt through listening from the Guru to the Shishya. So the Upanishad does not establish universal rules for how all of this is to be done. It just provides the key terms that need to be followed, that need to be paid attention to in the context of the learning. So that is the Shiksha Dhyaya. Then you have the third Anuvaka that goes into the next level, and these are the Samhitayam Upanishadaha. Athata Samhitaya Upanishadam Vyakhyāsyāmaha. That is how the next Anuvaka begins. This is numbered the third Anuvaka of the Shiksha Valli. Before that, it comes up with a short prayer as well. Sahanau Yashaha Sahanau Brahma Varchasam Athata Samhitaya Upanishadam Vyakhyāsyāmaha Panchasvadhikarneshu Adhilokamadhijyautisamadhividyamadiprajamadhyatmam Tamaha Samhita Ityachakshate. And then it starts Atha Adhilokam. So at this point, let us see what has just been said. So before starting off with the Upanishad of the Samhita, Samhitayam Upanishadam Vyakhyasyamaha, there is again a short, almost a Shanti mantra. Saha now yashaha, saha now brahmavarchasam. This is a short prayer between teacher and student. Saha, together, now for the two of us. Yashaha, glory, fame. Saha now brahmavarchasam, together for us may there be brahmavarchas, the splendor of learning, glory. So there is a short, it kind of resonates with the other Shanti mantra that we know. Sahana bhavatu, sahanau bhunaktu. So the same word saha and now are used. Now refers to the two of us, the teacher and the student. So may there be, for both of us, the teacher and the student, may there be yashaha, brahmavartasam, glory and name and fame and the splendor of learning. So with this prayer, you continue on to Athata Sagamhitaya Upanishadam Vyakhyasyamaha. What is Samhita here? Samhita essentially refers to the joining of two different things. And this is taught in Upanishadam, refers to the secret teaching of the joining of two different things. Vyakhyasyamaha, we will explain. Same word as we saw in the previous Anuvaka. And so now you will appreciate in this Anuvaka, there is an occasion to appreciate why Shankara took the pains to explain the word Vyakhyasyamaha with reference to the verbal root chaksh. Because in the same Anuvaka, after saying Sagamhitaya Upanishadam Vyakhyasyamaha, it rounds it up by saying Itya chakshate. You see the verbal root chaksh coming up here, achakshate. So with the root chaksh, adding the prefix a and adding the prefix v before that is how we get Vyakhyasyamaha, because the root chaksh changes to kya. Shankaracharya has already explained that in the previous Anuvaka. So he does not bother explaining that yet again. He just goes on with interpreting what is meant here. So what is taught in the next few sentences in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Shiksha Valli, are the Samhitayaha Upanishadam. The Upanishad, the secret teaching of the Samhita, the coming together of what? It is taught in 5 chapters, Pancha Swadhikaraneshu. It is taught in under 5 headings, 5 subsections, Adhikaranas. Adhilokam, Adhijyautisham, Adhividyam, Adhiprajam, Adhyatmam. Adhilokam, that which pertains to the world. Adhijyautisham, that which pertains to light. Adhi Vidya, that which pertains to learning, Vidya. Adhiprajam, that which pertains to praja or progeny, people. Adhyatmam, that which pertains to oneself. So in these 5 subsections, the Upanishad is telling us, it will teach us about the Samhitayaha Upanishad, the secret teaching of the coming together of the Samhita. So at that point, I will stop this particular session. We will start off with the middle of the 3rd Anuvaka. In the next session, we will go through what are these details of Adhiloka, Adhijyautisha, Adhividya, Adhipraja and Adhyatma pertaining to the world, the lights, learning, people or progeny and the self. Thank you.